Hi, it's Andy, and in this video I'm going to explain tablature. What is tablature? How is it different than notation? What do all the different symbols mean? Okay, so here we go. Let's start with something basic. In tablature, the 6 lines on the page represent the 6 guitar strings. However, you might discover that they're upside down, essentially. The skinniest string of the guitar, when you look at your guitar, is the closest string to the floor. However, when you look at tablature, the skinniest string is the string closest to the top of the page, or closest to the ceiling. So I know that seems a little backwards, but just think of this. The highest sounding notes are at the top of the sheet. And likewise, the thickest string of the guitar, even though when you look at your guitar, it's the closest one to the ceiling, when you look at tablature on a piece of paper, the thickest string is at the very bottom. So the low notes are at the bottom. So the first thing to learn is that the strings kind of seem upside down from the perspective of looking at your guitar. Okay, with that aside, let's just do a very easy note, like an open string. If the page says 0 on the high E string, that means you play fret number 0. Don't play any frets. Just hit the string and play a note without pressing any frets. Some people look at that note as an O, as an open string. An open string is a string that's plucked with your pick but doesn't have any notes pressed down on the fretboard. So you can think of that either as a 0 or as an open string. Okay, now if the sheet says play fret 3, you simply press down fret number 3. And now you ask yourself, well, which string is it? Well, if it's on the skinniest string, it's this one. You press down fret 3 and pluck the skinniest string with your pick. Now, which finger do you use? It doesn't say on the sheet. You could use any one of your fingers to press down the note. So usually if it's fret 3, I'll be using finger 3, as in 1, 2, 3, 4. So finger 3 is this one. But sometimes in certain songs you would use a different finger, so you don't have to use finger 3. So one of the things about tablature is it doesn't tell you which finger plays which note. You'd have to write that in separately somehow, either above or below the tablature. Okay, so what if we want to play, say for example, 3rd fret on the A string? Okay, that looks like this. So I'm pressing down the 3rd fret and I'm on the 5th guitar string. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's called the A string. It's very wise to learn the letters of the strings because guitar players, including myself, will refer to the letters of the strings. E, B, G, D, A, E. You should learn all of those strings. Easter bunnies get drunk after Easter. There, now you know all the strings. You'll never forget them. So, let's move on. The next thing we're going to cover is a hammer-on. What is a hammer-on? Okay, if it says H on the paper, that refers to a hammer-on. So let's take an easy example. If it says, say for example, play fret 7 and then hammer on to fret 9, then you would play this. I'll give you a close-up view on that. What you do is you put your finger on fret 7, press down the note, take your pick, play the appropriate string, and then take another finger and slam it onto fret 9 without using the pick. So the audience will hear 2 notes even though you plucked the string only once, like this. Takes a pretty hard hit of the finger to slam on the note to make it loud enough. But that's called a hammer-on. And it's represented by the letter H. Okay, let's try Pull-offs next. A pull-off is represented by the letter P, and for a pull-off you have to have two fingers ready to go. In this case I've got fret 7 and I've got fret 9, and both fingers are ready to play. And I'm going to pluck the string, and you're going to hear the note on fret number 9. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take that 9th fret note away. And now you hear fret 7 ringing out. So essentially what I did is I revealed that fret 7 note that was hidden. Right now that fret 7 note is covered up by fret 9. So you're hearing fret 9, and then when I take the 9 away, now you hear 7. Okay, so this requires kind of a pluck of the string. So you literally have to play the string by plucking it with your finger. Like that. That's called a pull-off, and it's represented by the letter P. Or sometimes you see a little rainbow over the top of the notes. Those rainbows are called Schiller marks, and they're used to represent hammer-ons or pull-offs because they kind of fall in the same category. They're called slurs. Now sometimes you see an H and a P, like a hammer-on and a pull-off. So in that case you're going to do your hammer-on like this, and then immediately do your pull-off like that. So I did a hammer-on and a pull-off. The audience heard 3 notes even though I only used my pick to pluck the string once. That was a hammer-on and a pull-off. You could sustain the sound of the guitar indefinitely with hammer-ons and pull-offs like this. If you just keep doing it over and over, you have indefinite hammer-ons and pull-offs. Now that's called a trill. A trill is represented by a TR above the notes, or sometimes it has a squiggly line above the notes. So trill is abbreviated TR, and it's just a series of hammer-ons and pull-offs. Okay, now let's move on. Let's cover slides. If you see a ramp on the sheet, which looks like a kind of a slash mark, or if you see the letter S, that stands for a slide. A slide is done this way. First you play a note. In this case I'm playing fret 7 on the G string, and you simply keep the pressure with your finger and slide it to a new note. In this case I'm sliding to the 9th fret. So it sounds like this. Try to keep the string ringing so that you hear a note once you arrive in the new location. That's called a slide. A slide could be done in any direction. A slide could be played between any 2 notes on the guitar. So if you see an S or a slash mark that looks like a ramp, that's called a slide. Alright, now the next item that we're going to cover is called a bend, and bend is represented by the letter B. And sometimes you see a letter B or maybe an arrow sticking up from the note, like a note that has an arrow pointing up toward the sky. Or sometimes it'll have, say for example, 5B7. Let's talk about what that means. If it says 5B7, you're going to play fret 5 like this, and then you're going to bend it by pushing the string up toward the ceiling. Or you could pull the string toward the floor also. Those are both called bends. Okay, I don't like to do bends with 1 finger because it feels kind of weak, so I'm going to put 3 fingers in a row all on the same string so that when I do my bend I can push with all 3 fingers. That way I have 3 times the muscle. Okay, we are going to bend the 5th fret until, how far are we going? until it sounds like the 7th fret. Does this note sound like the 7th fret now? I don't know. Let's find out. Let's play the 7th fret and see what it sounds like. That's the sound we want. Okay, so we have to bend the 5th fret until it makes the sound that you'd get if you played the 7th fret. That's what 5B7 means. You don't actually play the 7th fret. You play the 5th fret, and then you get the sound of the 7th fret. There it is. Okay, a general rule with bends is this. If you want to make the bend sound like a note that's 1 fret higher, like say 5 to 6, you're going to push the string over until it's about where the next string is. Or in other words, you're going to push the 2nd string over until it's approximately where the 3rd string usually lies. And of course that's an approximation, because when you do a bend, you often will push the neighboring string a little bit out of the way as well. So it's a rough estimate, but that's a good gauge to start with. Now if you want to make a bend that sounds 2 frets higher, like in our example of 5 to 7, you'll have to push the string until it's in the place where you're 2 strings over. In other words, you push the 2nd string all the way over until it's where the 4th string is. That's a good general rule for bends. So a bend will usually sound like a note that's 1 fret higher or 2 frets higher. And another thing that people use to describe those different types of bends is halfstep and wholestep. Sometimes you see that abbreviated in tablature. HS is halfstep and WS is wholestep. Or you might even see a little tiny 1/2 or a little tiny 1. Little tiny 1/2 means, you know, bend half step, and a little tiny 1 means bend a whole step. And what that boils down to is if you're going to bend half a step, that means it's a small bend, like say 5 to 6. It's a bend that sounds like it's only 1 fret higher. If you bend using a whole step, then you're bending and getting the sound of a note that's 2 frets higher. Okay, so in layman's terms, a half step bend is 1 fret, a whole step bend is 2 frets. Now every once in a while, like if you're reading some Jimmy Page and some Led Zeppelin solos, you might see a 1.5 steps. Okay, well that's the sound of 3 frets higher. Or you might see a bend that's 2 full steps. Okay, well that's 4 frets higher. That's about the biggest bend you'll ever see right there. If you tried to bend further than that, you'd break your strings. Okay, so we covered bends. What else? Okay, bend and release. Let's talk about that. Sometimes you see 5B7, like we just talked about, and then it will say R5, and the R stands for release. In other words, you're going to release the bend. Let's take a look at that. You play the 5th fret and you bend until it sounds like 7, and then you release the bend. And hopefully the sound is still ringing out. So the string goes up and it goes down. So sometimes you see arrows that go up and then go down. If it's a tablature printed off the internet, it'll just say 5B7 R5. So to boil that down, it's play the 5th fret, bend it until it sounds like the 7th fret, release it back to the 5th fret again. So a bend and release. Okay, let's talk about something else. Vibrato. Sometimes it just says the letter V, which stands for vibrato. Or sometimes people put a slash going up and down and up and down and up and down. Or it might be abbreviated VIB. And vibrato is a way to shake a note. Let's take a look at that. So you play a note, and then you kind of shake your hand up and down toward the floor and toward the ceiling, and you might shake your guitar as well. It's like a little tiny bend that you do over and over and over until the note fades away. That's vibrato. It could be done with any finger. You can play vibrato on any note of the guitar. You can even put 3 fingers down and all on the same string and vibrato all 3 fingers on the same string. You can vibrato pulling down toward the floor or pushing up toward the ceiling. You can even vibrato left, right, left, right, left, right. I prefer to go up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay, sometimes vibrato will be combined with a bend. In other words, you might have to do a bend, and then once you're bending a string, you have to vibrato there, which probably will be best learned by just shaking your entire guitar. That's bending with vibrato. Okay, let's talk about more symbols. You might see the letters P and B before a note. PB, that means pre-bend. I'm going to teach you that. What that means is you get ready to play the note. You put your finger on the note you want to play, but you don't play it yet. First, you're going to push the string and do a bend. Once the string is in position and you're holding your bend with your fingers, then you use your pick and you pluck the note. And then who knows what will happen. You might release the bend, or you might hold it longer, you might move to a different note. But if it says PB and the number 5, that means that you're going to push the string and do your bend first and then play. So that's called a pre-bend, or some players call that a ghost bend. Okay, let's see, what else is there? A unison bend. Let's talk about that. I don't think there's really an abbreviation for unison bend, but it is kind of a guitar trick, and it's hard to write it on tablature because with a unison bend, you play one normal note and you play another note that has a bend at the same time. I'm going to show you that. In this case, I'm going to play the 5th fret on string 2 like this. And then I'm going to play the 7th fret on string 3 like this. Okay, now I'm only going to bend one of those notes, and the other one is going to stay right where it is. So I'm going to hold this note right where it is, and I'm not going to move it. This note right here, I'm going to bend. So with my pick, I'm going to play both of the strings like this, and then I'm going to bend one of the notes, but not the other. That's called a unison bend. I usually like to put 2 fingers on the string that I'm going to bend, so I get twice as much muscle. Notice that these 2 notes now sound the same. That's called unison. So therefore, unison bend.